Thank you everyone for being here. So, Assalamu alaikum everyone. We need more energy. So, Assalamu alaikum everyone. Okay, perfect. So we are talking about the music scene in Pakistan, and music scene जो पाकिस्तान का पिछले आपने 10-12 सालों में देखा है, how that's completely revolutionized. किस तरीके से आप थोड़ा सा सीधा होकर बैठूंगा. Yeah, किस तरीके से पाकिस्तानी music scene has completely revolutionized. It's been upcoming. हमारी जो beats हैं कहाँ पहुँच रही हैं. There's so many artists, including everyone on this panel. उनके अलावा हमारे साथ there's so many people who've been outperforming, outshining. And not just across the border, but across the world, we've had हमारा music going. अभी Miss Marvel में we heard Pakistani tracks playing. अभी हमारे पास across the world. So basically, point is what we're going to be talking about are real conversations. अभी हम चारों ने बात जब की आने से पहले यहाँ पे, I asked everyone कि जी what should we talk about? And one thing that we all agreed is that we want to have some real conversations, not just stuff that you would hear on a panel कि जी जो बातें आप जनरली पैनल्स में सुनते हैं. सो आज आई रियली वांट ऑल आर्टिस्ट टू स्पीक देयर हार्ट्स आउट. सबसे पहला मेरा आप सबसे ये सवाल एज समवन हु हैज़ बीन सीइंग कि पिछले 10-12 सालों में टेक्नोलॉजी की वजह से म्यूज़िक कंजम्पशन कैसी चेंज हो रही है और किस तरीके से चैनल्स डिफरेंट चेंज हो रहे हैं. वेयर एग्जैक्टली इज़ द पाकिस्तानी ऑडियंस लिसनिंग टू म्यूज़िक? हमारी जो आवाम है, द मैसेज हैं, वो म्यूज़िक को सुन कहाँ पे रहे हैं? I'm open to anyone. Natasha, do you want to go first? And then
sure. Assalamu alaikum everyone. So from my understanding is that at some point in the early 2010s, the primary way of majority of Pakistani people listening to music was to go take their phone to a Shahzad CD shop or Offbeat and be like, iske andar gaane bhar dein. That completely depended on what the Shahzad CD shop wanted to give them. Then when the YouTube ban got lifted, YouTube became the primary space for people to access music because it's not, you don't need to register, there's no payment, there's no subscription you need to have there. And I feel like SoundCloud had its moment, but primarily when you're talking about like a mass audience, it is just on YouTube because you also see the trends reflected in terms of the data that is now coming out. What is trending #1 is very clearly not what the aunties in defense are listening to. So like that is also like the data you're now getting at that point, like it's very evident. Spotify has now kind of broken in, which is great because the algorithms, I personally benefit from them a lot. I want them to take all my data so I can find the new music that I want. But Spotify has now come in, which has allowed people through the means of curation to find the artists that they need and for the music to reach the right audiences.
And for you guys as artists, आपके लिए एक broader सवाल कि पिछले 10 सालों में, पिछले 15 सालों में, how exactly has the advent of technology changed music production for you? Over to anyone कि music production की in the past few years, how's that changed for you? Abdullah, do you want to go here?
Yeah, I mean when I think about like, only now have I started to gain an appreciation for music before the era of like digital audio workstations, which I can't even comprehend how that worked, like making music on tape. I was really lucky to have sort of started my musical journey at a time when we were just beginning to see the proliferation of DAWs, right, as you call them, which is sort of just one comprehensive software where you can create all sorts of musical compositions. And it's really that technology particularly that's like become a standard. It's revolutionized music production globally. And within that, when you look at the kind of tools that are available to artists, like it's kind of staggering the kind of technologies that we have available to us, right? Like we're nearing a point where like AI is going to replace us, I feel. Like, I mean, if anybody's heard AI demos of like Travis Scott imitations, it's kind of terrifying. But, like music production has kind of changed entirely because of technology, and I think also because of like just the globalization that comes with technology. I feel like people's sonic sensibilities have also been affected just because there's such a broader exposure and availability to sounds from all sorts of times and spaces. And so yeah, I mean, I don't think music is the same as it was pre, the 21st century.
ज़ेब आपसे मेरी बात हो रही थी अभी इससे पहले, and again, पिछले 15 साल में you've also seen this paradigm shift in terms of how you're producing music, again rooted in in kind of your what was tradition, but also, as you just told me, and she's going to talk about it, कि अभी आप electronic music पे भी अब आप काम कर रही हैं. So, do you feel कि was this something that was forced कि जी मुझे अब adapt करना है, or is this something that's coming naturally to you? You're seeing how things are changing and then you're adapting according to how the trends are going.
I mean, there is a मेरे लिए तो I'll be quite honest. मैं तो बहुत डरती थी ना technology से. Like I was one of the last people in my friends group who got a smartphone. And I was like, what is this WhatsApp? So, but the thing is कि to be honest, especially when it comes to music and sharing of music, I really didn't have a part to play in it because I was working with my cousin who was she was a computer science engineer. तो उसने किसी website पे चढ़ा लिया हमारा music, some matrimonial website पे, and before we knew it, हमारा music, everyone was hearing it. So right from the very beginning, मतलब the way music is disseminated through the internet is how we came to be, musicians, because I was studying finance and she was studying computer engineering. तो उस वक्त ये था कि हम लोग Napster पे होते थे and हम लोग हज़ारों हमारी बड़ी friendships होती थी and we used to like एक दूसरे की क्या कहते हैं files share करते थे and a lot of people would say to us, this is the end of music. Then YouTube came and Coke Studio blew up and then they said this is the end of music and this is the end of original music. Ab Spotify jab aaya a while ago, so I remember because I have a band based out of Brooklyn and I've been for the past 10 years, so I do my own little kind of passion project there. So I remember a lot of my American friends around 6 years ago were saying Spotify is here, this is the end of musicians and music. But the thing is, the interesting thing to me about like as someone who's not really grown up but is kind of an observer of these different technologies is कि शुरू में आती है एक जैसे एक disruption होती है and you do feel this sense of fear and you feel कि अच्छा अब नहीं होगा, अब वो process नहीं होगा, अब वो expression नहीं होगी, अब सिर्फ एक किस्म का music होगा. But as time goes by, वो space खुद ही बन जाती है, वो participation आना शुरू हो जाती है as long as you participate. So that's the most exciting thing for me क्योंकि मैंने काफ़ी इस किस्म की disruptions अपने 15 साल के career में देख लिए हैं, तो अब मुझे डर नहीं लगता. So I'm quite happy with I'm just saying bring it on.
तो अगर डर नहीं लग रहा, उसमें I'm very curious कि how experimentational have you been with the new work that you're doing? अभी जो आपने LA में the electronic work that you're talking
हाँ
about.
जी, तो that's another thing. अब जैसे हम लोग electronic music की बात करते हैं, तो we like to believe that this is something so new. But if you look at bands like Eurythmics, you look at bands like Depeche Mode from the 80s. So there was a lot of that stuff, those elements. I mean, genres they keep taking from each other. Like even the way you make music might, but styles and all and nothing really comes out of nothing. Everything is linked to some other movement. So मेरा ये था कि I grew up in the 80s. तो मेरे लिए like going back into that kind of soundscape जो कि मुझे मेरे बचपन की याद देता था, it was very exciting. So in some ways you can say I'm being experimental, but in another way it's really like I'm really trying to see how new, because my producer is only like 25 years old, so I'm trying to see how he is like kind of seeing what I'm hearing, the music that I bring. So मज़ेदार है, मज़ा.
So सवाल भी यही कि what is the success criteria? How do artists themselves define success? So Abdullah, आपसे मैं start करूँगा. So what would you define as success? कि यार ये music अच्छा था मेरी नज़र में.
Hi, hello everyone. बड़ा मुश्किल सवाल है, I think personally. The numbers do give me confidence, I think, और एक sort of होता है कि अच्छा सही है, लोग सुन रहे हैं और मतलब I can rely on this thing, but success itself, I don't know. I think personally मेरे लिए success ये होगा कि I amplify voices and और ज़्यादा stories सामने आए इस जगह की और इस जगह का जो context है. वो सामने आए जितना ज़्यादा हो सके, I think that would be success. बाकी चीज़ें are there, they give you happiness, I think. वो जो numbers और वो वाली sort of financial stability वाली भी एक चीज़ होती है कि अच्छा सही है ये कर सकते हैं, पर success I think is very subjective. Yeah.
So for you, की stories कितनी सामने आई हैं? What new things?
Yeah, authentic stories and authentic dialogues जिससे लोग connect कर सकें, I think.
Abdullah, how about you?
It's an interesting question. I think for me, when I think about like what's fundamentally been missing from the music industry and what's kind of been detrimental to its sustainability in the long run has been just the fact that people as a whole on a cultural structure level don't value music enough, right? And it's a very foundational problem to have. For me, a successful work is just something that is a good enough, representational enough, resonant enough work that it will cause somebody to value music.
Right.
That's really, even if it's just as far as that one work, right? If it just communicates the power of music, that I feel like to me is a criteria for success, because in the long run what that does is it helps you to exercise and commodify the power of music as a tool for social change, as a tool for, you know, any number of things.
Right.
So yeah, that's it needs to make music matter to people.
So something that changes in perspectives of people
Yeah.
about the work that you've done, or about in general, what perspective will change them.
Yeah.
Natasha, how about you?
I think numbers are very important because it's important to remember that musicians don't have very many ways of monetizing, right? So unless I have good numbers, I can't go to a brand or whoever is going to be funding to be like, "Hey, yaar, mere gaane achhe hain." They won't believe me. Even if my songs are good, if I don't have 1 million views, they won't believe me. So numbers are really essential to, you know, sell my art to the people who are paying for it. But for me, I think what's amazing and what's brought value to me and what causes me to go back into the studio is when a single line from a song of mine becomes such a relevant cultural moment, especially for young women. I think that for me, I'm like, yes. When I have 6-year-olds, you know, kind of stressed out messaging me from their parents' Instagram accounts being like, "Did you make it out of the jal? Okay, are you okay from this video?" Like referencing a very specific thing. I think that emotional connection I savor so much. Because growing up, I know that I was obsessing over my favorite artists in a very similar way. I know that a lot of my trajectory has to do with how I ended up connecting with those artists in whatever way. The lyrics that you wrote at the back of your notebook or the chits that you would pass your friends, whatever it was. So I feel like whenever my art finds a place in somebody's like life as an inside joke, as a little moment, I think that's like a tick mark for me. I'm like, great, paise poore ho gaye.
Something that resonates, something that people remember, चाहे वो उसमें से एक आई नहीं हो, लेकिन something that people take away from that. Very nice. Zeeb, how about you? So आपके लिए एक success criteria क्या है?
नहीं, जिस तरह नताशा ने कहा वो एक ह्यूमन लेवल पे होती है सक्सेस, कि जब किसी भी इंसान की इंटीमेट मोमेंट्स का आप हिस्सा बन जाते हैं किसी भी लेवल पे, तो that to you is a success as you know, as an artist. But as someone who's participating in the market, you know, मैंने बड़े धोखे खाए हैं इस डिजिटल मार्केटिंग वर्ल्ड में, क्योंकि होता ये कि अल्टीमेटली आपको मिलियंस ऑफ व्यूज़ तो चाहिए हैं, बट उन मिलियंस ऑफ व्यूज़ पे अगर 10 कमेंट हैं तो वो मिलियन ऑफ व्यूज़ नहीं है, वो कोई रोबोट्स हैं. सो ये जो यू नो एक अजीब सी चीज़ आ गई है इन दिस वियर्ड लाइक, यू नो, रन फॉर मिलियंस एंड नंबर्स, is that we don't realize that actually from business perspective it's not very wise to have non-listening numbers. I mean, I'd much rather have 200,000 real listeners, because one is, एक तो ये कि हमारे music में we are heavily corporatized. So मतलब in terms of our independent music, वो which is a good thing, it's very good. But जो हमारा independent artist का जो अपना एक specific like audience building mechanism है, वो हम लोगों ने we haven't figured it out, because we haven't actually worked with, you know, I guess like people who are, you know, brilliant like tech masters that are sitting here, because I think हमें आप लोगों से पता करना है कि how do we do this? how do we actually reach our audiences? How do we actually get real numbers? And how do we actually, in real terms, gauge success? Because corporates buy, you know, they're known for buying tons and tons of, वो ad आ जाता है तो आपका view आ जाता है, millions आपके hits हैं, लेकिन वो सब एक ही चीज़ करें, gorgeous, 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 gorgeous. You know, like,
Bots that we have, yeah.
you know, so like, I'm done with the bots. Like, someone save me from the bots.
Which is a really interesting point. Ke aksar when I do interact with artists, because the artist is so consumed with the creativity and what they're churning out, the data sometimes just kind of misses. कि जी वो data को नहीं देख रहे या वो views को सिर्फ देख रहे हैं, लेकिन as you said कि वो views जो हैं वो actual data को कितना represent करते हैं, and whether if that's actually the ground reality of what the song or what the art is kind of doing or not. यहाँ पे जो मैंने आपका जो एक सेगवे निकलता है इसी बात से कि working with kind of that real engagement is a code that many artists want to crack. It's something that we discussed in the, well, not we, but it was discussed in the influencer panel as well yesterday. Social media has become a very major tool. And मेरी Abdullah जब आपसे बात हो रही थी, Abdullah Kasumbi आपसे, कि आपने फतवा के बारे में mention किया, which is a brand, which is an identity that you're trying to make. कि अब music ये नहीं रह गया कि जी गाना सुनना है और उसको बस ठीक है 3-4 दिन बजाया सुना उसके बाद यू मूव ऑन. नताशा की बात से लिंक ऑन करते हुए कि वो कुछ मैसेजेस होते हैं, कुछ उसकी आइडेंटिटी के अंदर थिंग्स डू रेजोनेट, एंड you've been doing a lot of work on identity, Abdullah Kasumbi. So you've been और okay, उतना आपको भारी लफ्ज़ ना दूँ, लेकिन you've worked on music as identity, especially how the music that you've produced with Hassan for example, या वो उसने young लोगों की identity में काफ़ी tap in भी किया है. तो anything about how social media is helping you do that, and then B में बाद में आता हूँ, लेकिन how is social media helping you kind of engage a wider audience, people who resonate with the music?
हसन के साथ जो मेरा काम था, I was I think I was really hungry to do something at that point. और हसन अपने गाने लिख रहा था, तो when I met him, तो हम दोनों का basically एक synergy यही थी कि we just need to put this out there. And I felt, मेरी gut feeling थी कि if we attach videos with it and sort of create an image which is true to Hassan, which is very core पे authentically Hassan ही है, I just thought it will connect with the audience. And the message in his songs was something that not just the message, I think the language he was using also, it was very क्या कहेंगे, relevant for his target audience, I think. So I think that gut feeling sort of did work out as we progressed with the songs and the videos, because I kept making videos and kept sort of creating that image, जो एक ही image sort of बन रही थी. So as it propagated, COVID hit हुआ है, COVID में digital I think use बहुत बड़ा है, लोग बहुत ज़्यादा इस्तेमाल कर रहे थे, तो that sort of worked in our favor. और क्योंकि एक आध कोई चीज़ आप जब जमा करते हैं, एक आपका बना हुआ होता है एक sort of portfolio, 3-4 गाने बने हुए थे हसन के, कोविड हिट हुआ है, हमने 2-3 और रिलीज़ किए, तो audience just gravitated towards it and they had more to listen to, more to watch, और वो एक image consistently बन रही थी. तो वो I think that was a very successful, I didn't have any formula पहले से, we just followed our instincts I think, and social media basically amplified that image.
मैं इस आपके सवाल से एक सेगवे वो भी निकलता है, you spoke about कि visuals being important with the sonic.
Yeah.
अब्दुल्ला से या नताशा से, आप लोगों से अगर मैं ये सवाल डायरेक्ट करूँ कि how important is a video in the current day and age to go with your song?
Hello. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think it's immensely important because, and I've said this to so many people at this point, but I feel like it rings true. It's just that like music for me growing up, and like I feel like a lot of us will relate to this. It wasn't just what I'm hearing, right? It was, and it also wasn't just what I'm looking at, right? It was the synergy that was then created in the form of a parasocial relationship with the artist, right? Which was that outside of the context of their music, I was invested in their lives, right? I was invested in their image. I was invested in what they stood for. You know, it wasn't just about music, right? And all of that comes from having a very unique visual identity, right? Whether that's in how they're styled, whether that's in, you know, the visual iconography that they're using in their music videos, their live performances, right? All of that works in tandem with the music to create a narrative, right? And it's sort of that narrative that is ultimately going to connect, you know? Like I feel like for the longest time in this industry, I feel like there's been sort of a lack of like individuality in like the way that artists have been presented, right? Now I feel like we're starting to see, you know, a movement in that sense. And I think, you know, like Hassan is a great example of that. Somebody who, you know, has a very specific look, a very specific feel, a very specific sound. And that I feel like is the key to why so many people connect with him, because he is very uniquely him in every sense, right? So visuals, I feel like you can never really have music live to its full potential without visuals, yeah.
Natasha, आपसे भी मैं यही सवाल पूछूंगा. And यही कि अगर so there's an artist who sang a song and they've produced a song now and उनके पास भी video नहीं है. Yeah, it's a new artist जिन्होंने video वो नहीं बना सकते. It's going to cost a lot more. Yeah, maybe they don't have the right kind of team for it. Should they just leave that song alone and उसको फिर ना उसके साथ video attach करें या और गाना ही ना release करें?
I mean, this is the conundrum in the current industry, is that you need to have money to make money, right? Like as it is with many businesses in general. When it comes to music, it really is at that point where एक ज़माने में जब आपके Discmans वगैरह होते थे या cassette players, etc., the visual came from the cassette cover, the kind of language that you used on that, or the CD covers, whatever it was. तो आपको जो Abdullah Siddiqui बात कर रहा था about the visual identity and that connection with the artist, you could draw it from there. Now, if you send someone an audio, they're going to listen to it at 2x on WhatsApp and be like, okay, thank you for this. So you do require that, but I'm going to take this back to Fatwa and to Abdullah Kasumbi, because I think in studying Fatwa as a model and all of the work that they done and Kasumbi's entire like repertoire from that year, frequency, and also low budget. That's what I loved about it, is that there was not a set that was used. I saw what was this, exactly, I saw in the visual ke paise nahi hai, maine kaha fit hai. Nice, मैं इसको loop पे देखूंगी, because that then captured an actual part of my life, like beyond the music itself. I was like, yeah, we are रोज राशन लेने चले जाते तो fit है. That's like the most watched video of that year. Or whether it's the work that he's done with various other bands in Karachi through Fatwa. I think that's the key, is that there's a jugaad to everything, right? Like I would happily sit and watch like a TikTok video for 3 minutes if the song has that. So I think the major thing is to, if we are talking about this kind of force of disruption, I think एक पहले monopoly भी होती थी ना, कि सारे TVC वाले uncle used to be making your music videos, and then everyone's music videos on Indus Music used to essentially look the same. वो ही किसी like सहरा में जाके, you know, one of the Jals is walking around looking sad, then another one is doing the same thing. The nice thing now is that there is so much, because of that lack of budget and funding and all of that, you get to actually see an artist perform in their space, be themselves. And I think that is the way to kind of keep going, as opposed to booking out massive studios to make the exact same music video over and over again.
और जो विजुअल की आपने वही बात की कि पैसे नहीं हैं लेकिन अब बनानी है और उसको लो बजट करके we're churning out music videos that are resonating with the audience. People find them very real and raw, especially with the younger audience as well. I was showing my mother this video of Juna actually. कि मैंने कहा देखिए जी अभी बच्चा इन हुआ, मैंने हसन रहीम का वो कोक स्टूडियो में इंटरव्यू करना था, तो शी वाज कि किसका कर रहे हो इंटरव्यू. मैंने देखा ये इसकी सबसे ज़्यादा वायरल एक वीडियो हुई. तो मैंने कहा ये क्या मतलब, वो ट्रॉली लेके बस वो ग्रोसरी स्टोर में फिर रहा है जाके और ये वीडियो ही करके. बट दैट्स द पॉइंट कि इट्स समथिंग दैट्स रेजोनेटिंग विद द ऑडियंस एंड इट्स गिविंग लॉन्जेविटी टू द सॉन्ग इटसेल्फ, बिकॉज इट डजंट जस्ट बिकम अ सॉन्ग, इट बिकम्स समथिंग दैट, as you mentioned, people take away and it resonates with audiences. पैसों की जी बात हो रही है. और I totally understand how within Pakistan specifically, but globally artists के साथ एक ये है कि जी आप art में इतने consumed हैं, and the money someone else, अभी आपने ज़ेब ने एक plea की है for tech people कि जी help artists out के इस तरीके से. लेकिन I want to talk about money specifically, and अभी what we've seen over the past kind of some years, probably post Coke Studio, is the whole corporate influence coming within the music space. आप सबका more or less कोई corporate उसमें influence में रहा है एक interaction. I start with you, Zeeb, आपका Pemona से, and then kind of your work with Coke Studio. How does corporate influence? How do you feel about corporate influence? सारे मतलब खुल के आपने जवाब देने कोई corporate वाले हैं यहाँ पे बहुत ज़्यादा हैं. लेकिन फिर भी how do you feel about corporate influence coming in and putting our music forward जिसमें पैसे वो आ जाते हैं, that solves one of the problems about money, but how do you feel about corporate influence on music overall?
I mean, I think it's great because if it wasn't for, I mean, because otherwise our industry isn't really, we don't really have an industry. With the, I mean, wo piracy ki wajah se, there was no real way for artists to really earn. And the point in Pakistan's history, musical history, where where Coke Studio kind of made an entry, and then other platforms, is also very, very important. Because at that point in time, you didn't have any shows because of security reasons. You didn't have any labels because of piracy. Basically, you weren't making money anywhere, and you weren't being showcased anywhere. And I think that, you know, it's actually really, it's proven now. I mean, you know, especially with this season, you know, how beach mein people felt, okay, you know, maybe Coke Studio, I don't know if it's as popular, but again, like, it comes with a new avatar, it comes with a new, like, there's always ways in which you can bring your creativity, bring another perspective in. And it's really helped us not only sustain in Pakistan, but also it's given us a name all over. I mean, in the region, we're known for music now, and now that's also kind of, you know, percolating elsewhere in the world. So.
Natasha, what about you? आपने क्योंकि Lahore Music Meet, and then that was Pepsi sponsored. So again, what do you feel about corporate influence, and then does that give you that creative space for things that you want to do?
So with, like, the one thing I do want to point out that with corporate music, if you know the song Coco Corina, the original, if you watch the video, that is actually the very first incorporation of Coca-Cola in a music situation. And this is like, we're talking about the 50s. You had lots of corporate involvement in music throughout the 80s, 90s, so on and so forth. So it's always been a part and parcel of music in that way. However, what happened with Coke Studio was it became the only source. So why, like, that is primarily my critique of what Coke Studio or any corporate music show does, whether it's Pepsi otherwise, is that as an audience, we rely on that as the primary space, and there is no alternative revenue stream. In the 14 years it has existed, no one has been able to set up a record label. No one in the last 30 years has decided that maybe it's a good idea to take these models that exist world over and work and function and maybe apply it to something that is independent so that they can exist in tandem. It's not about destroying the monster or killing the beast. It's like, great, exist, but you can't be the only space to kind of have that conversation. And I think because what that does is, as an entity, the responsibility of any corporate is to curate in the way that will ultimately amass them the most amount of profit. In a record label, the model is slightly different. You're looking at profit, but you're also ideally, hopefully, looking at the benefit of the artist. And artists have been mistreated for like decades. Like, this is just like a long drawn out story, but my basic like kind of thing is, even with Lahore Music Meet, we were given the option of having, we could have sold the brand and for the Lahore to be removed and for a cola to come in there, and the Music Meet would have been retained, but we kind of needed to make sure that our boundaries were drawn so that we could curate freely. This guy wouldn't have been there at 16 then, you know? That wouldn't have been an option because that's not going to bring in that like paper, the money, the vibes that you need to sell to get whatever you need back. So yes, it does great for the industry in terms of global messaging and everything, but I feel like a lot of us forget and rely on just that as the only space, as the primary space, when there's so much to be done outside of that space and to come up with alternatives for that. I've done.
थैंक यू अब्दुल्ला आपसे मैंने यही सवाल पूछना है लेकिन थोड़ा सा ज़्यादा स्पेसिफिक होके तो एक क्रिएटिविटी वो वाली जो कि म्यूज़िक मीट पे नताशा के थ्रू आपने नेगोशिएट करके आपको स्टेज पे मिली वर्सेस एक क्रिएटिविटी वो दैट कोक स्टूडियो में जुल्फी भाई के साथ वर्किंग विद बीइंग एन एसोसिएट प्रोड्यूसर विद हिम ऑन सो मेनी सॉन्ग्स गाइस सारों ने अब्दुल्ला के गाने सुने जितने एसोसिएट प्रोड्यूसर के तौर पे फ्रॉम टू झूम पसूरी एंड गो में यू वर सिंगिंग योरसेल्फ हाउ मच फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी मुझे जुल्फी भाई यहाँ पे डांटे नहीं हाउ मच फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी डिड यू हैव व्हेन यू वर वर्किंग विद कोक स्टूडियो टू बी योरसेल्फ ऑन दैट सेट
I have to turn my diplomacy filter on. No, I mean, so just firstly, like, there was a great amount of flexibility just because going into a corporate platform as an artist, you know, there's just like certain limitations, right? But also those limitations apply to indie music too, right? Because those limitations exist on a social, cultural level, right? So I don't think Coca-Cola has any real like boundaries that indie music doesn't already have. I mean, there's some leeway, but you know. But I think like, and we were discussing this recently because for me, and I've really kind of had to get some clarity on this in the long run, is that the end game of Coke Studio for me is not to create this incredible like monolithic like you know just platform that has like monopolized the industry, right? Like I don't think anybody wants that. The goal with Coke Studio going in and going back to what I was saying about like you know we talked about visual identities and like parasocial relationships, right? The goal was just to create a season that feels relevant enough to cultivate a new kind of listenership, a new kind of fandom, right? The way that people have been engaging with this music, the way that they've been, you know, doing covers and remixes and making fan art and, you know, reaction videos, like that culture didn't exist, I think, pre-COVID even, right? And so the goal with Coke Studio for me was to create that, right? And in doing that, create an infrastructure for an industry post-Coke Studio. Right? Because it's not going to go on forever. After Coke Studio, there needs to be an audience that's hungry for independent content, right? So that you can sort of foster an economy for that. So I feel like that's sort of the context for which, like, for me, like corporate platforms do sort of benefit the music industry in the long term. Like, I mean, we have discussed, like, you know, the way that there's like a certain amount of gatekeeping, right? There's a monopoly there, right? But I feel like if it's utilized in the right way and if it's done intelligently, then corporate music platforms can be used to, you know, rather, you know, help create an industry outside of it.
That's what is Salka Coke Studio, as we've seen, that there's been a paradigm shift in terms of how music is being seen and produced. And we talk about identity ki. It's been linked to a lot of different identities and for a lot of different audiences. एक चीज़ जो मैंने जी notice की post ये भी Coke Studio, again हम social media की बात कर रहे थे, उसमें ये कि a lot of young artists who, and we live in a post-Shagil world as well now, कि जहाँ पे a person who's just putting their music on a social media platform, गा के और अचानक all of a sudden gets picked up and then blows up by after coming on a particular song. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of young artists. There's a lot of young artists out there जो constantly अब वो अपना music डाल रहे हैं social media पे tag कर रहे हैं different लोगों को कि जी देखें etc. But for all of you who don't have a surname that supported you to become something in this industry, is there a magic formula for someone who's a young artist to do something कि जी ये करेंगे ना तो आपका गाना चल पड़ेगा या आपकी आर्ट जो है वो आर्टिस्ट को रेजोनेट करेगी? आई एम ओपन टू एनीवन, कोई भी आप में से अगर जवाब देखिए, इज देयर अ मैजिक फार्मूला कि ये करें या दिस इज व्हाट द यंग आर्टिस्ट शुड बी डूइंग? एंड कोई ये नहीं कि मेहनत करते रहें, बिकॉज एवरी मेहनत कर रहे हैं, लेकिन इज देयर समथिंग एल्स दैट यंग आर्टिस्ट नीड टू डू?
Okay, I'll just. I think up until maybe 4 years ago, I would have said there are some very clear archetypes of the kind of artists that make it in this industry, and you can just embody one of those archetypes, right? Now it's kind of a free-for-all. Yeah. I feel like it's the Wild West. Like there's no real predictive formula for like how somebody becomes successful. I think the one thing that I would tell anybody who's trying to pursue music is occupy a space in the industry that nobody else is occupying. Right? Because right now there's so many vacuums to be filled in terms of the kind, like there's so many sounds that haven't been explored in our industry. There's so many images and narratives that haven't been explored in the industry. Do something that nobody else is doing. Like, I feel like that's the only real, like, thing that we can hold on to at this point.
I like my old person perspective. Yeah. So I totally agree with this. I think the more you participate in music, and the more you participate in the industry, and you see highs and lows, and you see things blow up and people blow up, and I think मतलब वो आपने कहा था magic formula नहीं है लेकिन magic है, मतलब it's basically, it is quite magical. We don't know, and all four of us are actually testament to that magic, because मतलब जो अब्दुल्ला थे वो अपने दोस्त के साथ मज़े में प्यार में उन्होंने 3 वीडियोस बनाए, कंटेंट बनाया, वो हमको इतना भाया कि probably he is the only one जिनके इतने ज़्यादा मतलब in the past few years organic hits, मतलब you knew, like when that song hit 1 million, you knew that it was actually 1 million. So it was amazing. I didn't think it was possible in Pakistan. I mean, we have, so that's, तो ये कहाँ से आया, ये क्यों आया, आप कौन है, कहाँ से आए हैं, क्या कर रहे हैं, Same thing with, Abdullah here, mashallah, he's the premier producer, one of the youngest in our country. आप कहाँ से आए हैं भाई? Natasha just created out of her own passion and just out of, her own, I think, just stubbornness. She said, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it in Lahore, and I'm going to do it year after year, and I don't care. And she fought, and she cried, and she laughed, and she partied, but she made it happen. It could have been a failure, but it wasn't. It was actually a big success, something we're all proud of. I mean, I was studying finance and, art history in Mount Holyoke, all ready to go, join, live in New York. But the fact is, if it wasn't for my cousin, if it wasn't for Naseeb.com, it wouldn't have happened. So really, I mean, I know this is not what everyone's looking for, but that's just the way, art works. You just have to do your thing.
And we're talking about breaking the status quo, which is exactly what you've talked about as well. Because status quo जो है, tech के perspective से हो, जिस भी perspective से, लेकिन break the status quo if you're a young artist trying to make your own space within this kind of industry. मेरा आखिरी सवाल अब्दुल्ला कसुम्बी आपसे है, क्योंकि you have cracked that code that Zeeb also spoke about, कि resonating with a Gen Z audience. You've got so many hits because of the way you guys have been kind of producing music. तो यहाँ पे tech वाले भी लोग इतने ज़्यादा जो बैठे हुए हैं, and with Pakistan being a very burgeoning population, हमारी जो है वो youth की भी एक massive है, जो Gen Z और millennials का हमारा एक वहाँ पे bulge है population का. What is that Gen Z का scene क्या है? Basically, what is it that the Gen Z is now looking for?
I don't know Gen Z का क्या scene है, honestly. मैं millennial हूँ. But I feel कि Gen Z हो या कोई भी और generation हो, I think what you connect with is authentic context और उस जगह की जो असली बातें हैं, that's what you connect with. When you remove all the flowery stuff and जो ऊपर से चीज़ें आप डालते हैं वो सब हटा दें, तो core पे जो चीज़ आपकी जो असली story है उससे connect करता है कोई भी audience, I think. And I think Gen Z का थोड़ा सा सीन ये है कि they are better judges of that thing जो आप पैकेज करके उनको दे रहे हैं, वो बहुत जल्दी I think देख लेते हैं कि इसमें जो कोर चीज़ है वो उससे वो कनेक्ट कर रहे हैं कि नहीं. I think फतवा की जब आपने बात की थी, फतवा पे भी by the way Shams is it's फतवा is her brainchild. Shams ने मुझे basically शुरू में कुछ थीम्स बताई थी जिन पे वो बात करना चाह रही थी, एंड आई कनेक्टेड विद दैट वेरी स्ट्रांगली. और उस दिन से मैं अब तक फतवा पे काम कर रहा हूँ. These were stories around जो हम सब experience करते हैं. I think इस कमरे में हम जो लोग हैं वो भी हम एक certain तबके से आए हुए हैं. It's not a true representation of our country's population, I think. तो वो जो बातें थी basically वो उन चीज़ों के बारे में थी, फैमिली के बारे में, जो हम फैमिली में चीज़ें एक्सपीरियंस करते हैं, जो लोग बात नहीं करते. हमारे जो फीमेल एक्सपीरियंस है पाकिस्तान में रहने का, उस चीज़ की बातें, बॉडी मूवमेंट एंड मेंटल स्पेस, इस तरह की बातें, ये सारी बातों से आई थिंक जेनजी या कोई भी और जनरेशन कनेक्ट करेगी. जो असली बातें, जिस चीज़ के बारे में हम बात करने से डरे हुए हैं अब तक, आई थिंक वो जब आप बातें खोल के करेंगे तो कोई भी आई थिंक कनेक्ट करेगा जिसका वो कॉन्टेक्स्ट रहा है, उसका एक्सपीरियंस रहा है.
So authenticity, rawness and boldness, ये तीनों चीज़ों के बारे में कि authentic होने चाहिए जो भी चीज़ है, raw
I think
हो.
so, yeah. यही है.
Exactly. I'm going to pass over to the audience as well. हम लोग अभी questions के लिए आ रहे हैं कि उसमें बस लास्ट एक ही चीज़ कि when again मैं जब कोक स्टूडियो में when we were working उधर अब्दुल्ला remembers कि मैं behind the scenes coverage कर रहा हूँ and I'm just making raw videos कि अच्छा ये हो रहा है and I was like जुल्फी भाई मुझे नहीं पता क्या करना है यहाँ पे आके and he just sat me down, he was like Ghazi बात सुनो, बस सिर्फ तुमने एक चीज़ करनी है, तुमने ना बनना नहीं है कुछ, बस जो है ना वो दिखा दो, वो लोगों के दिलों में लगेगी बात. And that's exactly what happened later on with videos as well. So that's exactly what I kind of hear echoing here. कि जो चीज़ है, जो असल इमोशन है, वो दिखाएं बजाय कि वो जो बनावट है, वो अब यंग लोगों को पता, they can see through it. Is what I see happening with you. So thank you so much, everyone. अब मैं panel हम लोग will just open to a round of questions. We'll take 3 questions एक साथ ही ले लेते हैं ताकि फिर जल्दी से आंसर हो जाएं. तो मैं अपना माइक अच्छा जी, सवाल जो होता है प्लीज कीप इट वेरी ब्रीफ एंड इट शुड एंड विद अ क्वेश्चन मार्क.
So brief, yes. So a lot of things that the panelists mentioned here, especially around the corporate influence and all those, and why that has almost been a necessity in the growth of the industry. It's a simple question, maybe not a long answer, but how exposed is the Pakistan music industry to technologies like NFTs and other Web 3.0, where we are able to solve some of these issues, like cutting out the middleman and getting that early revenue for your work by making it like not copyable, by protecting it against piracy, and by cutting out like more middlemen. It's just a simple question: how exposed is the industry right now? I know it's early days.
Technology, so NFT के Okay, so that's one question. We'll take one more question and then answer पे आएंगे और उसके बाद फिर if there's more time. One. Please अपना नाम भी बता दें पहले. Yeah, your mic is on.
Hi. My name is Maria Shahid. So my question, I'm just going to say, might be a little heavy, but Pakistan is a developing country. So we have uneven socioeconomic development in the country. What you guys are expressing, a lot of your opinions. Majority of our population does not relate to that. Not because they disagree with you, but perhaps हम English में बात कर रहे हैं यहाँ पे, it doesn't resonate with them. When you express yourself, you're always at a point where you're open for judgment. We are a Muslim nation, and there's a set of guidelines that we claim to adhere by. How much do you worry about being yourself and basically your security? Because the political situation in the country is volatile. So I wanted to know, whenever you're making art and you're expressing yourself, do you worry like, what if somebody sees this and they get angry? What if somebody accuses me of the blasphemy law? So yeah, that was my question.
3-4 सवाल हैं एक ही सवाल के अंदर बड़े. But should we go with that question first and then come to Umar's question? Whoever wants to take the question. कि पहला वाला is about expressing yourself to a wider audience which may not resonate with you, may or may not resonate with you. और हम जी उर्दू इंग्लिश में दोनों में बात कर रहे थे वैसे तो, लेकिन ठीक है, I understand. So whoever wants to take this
Which
question.
one are we answering first?
Whichever one.
I think living in Pakistan as a woman, you are at risk of dying, being told off for anything. So whether I do it as a musician and say what I'd like to say, I don't think that that's really a concern. I think that everyone fears for their security, their safety, their sanctity, no matter how good or bad they're being on any spectrum in Pakistan. That is what the last, 3 decades of my life I've seen. There's always political instability, but the really wonderful thing is that you have a culture, आपका जो एक सकाफत है जो पाकिस्तान से भी पुराना है. That is something that you are allowed to tether yourself to. That is something that is constantly facing erasure, and hence this monoculture is trying to be exported from Pakistan. So I think that it is essential for everyone, and you're absolutely right. We are a bunch of, elite musicians sitting here, but the main essence is that we are able to then open doorways for individuals who don't have access to this. It is an elite game. You need money to make money, to have a studio, to have a laptop, to do these things. But I think the most essential thing is you don't ban things like TikTok. You don't take away anything that actually allows the lower class, the lower middle class to actually be able to speak and to be seen, because nothing about their visibility on TV and music and whatever on billboards, you don't see them. They still buy those products. Right? But what is our job as this generation is to make sure that they are heard, that they are seen, whether it is what we do in who is backstage and who is in front of the camera, in how we curate. I think that's essential, is that we take our agency rather than just being like, yeah, let's be scared and hide out, because your fate is going to be the same. Your fate is absolutely going to be the same. When it comes to NFTs, I think that would be great, because music in Pakistan has no revenue streams. A lot of the music that actually gets viral, I don't like wo jo abhi Tarboos Lal wala jo bhi nikla tha kya kehte video. I think if you manage to give back to them by just taking, because a lot of people will take that small viral snippet, make remixes, and then make money off those remixes, and it's usually European DJs who are doing that. In fact, European individuals buy a lot of Pakistani old music, relicense it, make money off of it. So I think NFT, incorporation of Web3, हमें सिखा दें, ये भी अच्छा होगा, हम भी ज़रा like tuitions दे दें हमें. But primarily being able to target especially the lower tabqa, especially people from a class that will not get agency through a corporate or through otherwise. If you are able to kind of help them benefit, I think that's the most magical thing you could be doing in tech, is taking art and making it profitable for someone who that would be stolen from. And so much art has been stolen from South Asia, so much culture has been stolen from Pakistan, that I think that you would be doing a service.
I just wanted to add to that question, and there's also an aspect of it, sometimes we also like to play parts. I mean, when we come as artists, we're not always being ourselves also. That doesn't mean that there's an authenticity in it. There's authenticity in it, but there's a part of us that we choose to show and that we don't choose to show. So that kind of censorship is happening. It happens in every market. It happens in every context. I mean, like even if you look at someone like Lady Gaga, was she really expressing herself, or was it social pressure? Was it, the bullying that she was responding to? So, I mean, it's a kind of a larger question. So I don't think it's super specific. And I mean, sometimes what's interesting is that art always does thrive in adversity. So sometimes when you have boundaries, that's our thing. Like as artists, we do like funny things where we're not real. It's not on the nose. Like we don't have to say support this in a song. We can say it many different ways, Or usme bhi maza hai.
Either one of you want to comment? Yeah. Great. I think we're almost out of time, but I'm still going to take the liberty and actually just open it to one more question, because I think 3 would be good. A gentleman is very enthusiastic about asking that question, so if you can please.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Shahzeb. I'm a student that also happens to have an interest in music. So when we brought up the point about the visual aspect of music being very important now, I just kind of look back and see that during the times of classical music, when there was no such thing as visualness, all of the focus was really on the music itself. So I want to know that, is it still really, really important for somebody like me, for example, who wants to express only through the music? is there still a place for people like me in Pakistan to grow and things like that? Because we talked about how now, okay, cool.
That's an interesting one. I think that visuals are kind of like one of the reasons why they're so important is because it's it's not like you say that there's sort of a history of music being appreciated for music's sake without a visual element, but I feel like a visual element doesn't always just mean like a music video, right? It can just mean sort of whatever cultural iconography is pertinent to the time that a piece of music is from, right? And where does it come from, like specifically in terms of like its cultural background? So, I feel like whatever music output there is now, I feel like there should be some sort of visual output with it, and that doesn't always have to be a music video. Like we talked about NFTs, right? Like there's all sorts of innovative ways to go about that, but I feel like that's just, music really does need a visual component. That's just like what I believe in. But personally for me, like when I was in the earlier days of my own sort of independent work, I was sort of in a similar situation where I couldn't make visuals, right? I had no idea how to go about that. So like the way that I compensated for that was by making very visually evocative music, right? So like I went out of my way to make music that incorporated real world sounds and ambient sounds and Foley, right? Just to kind of evoke cinematic real world spaces so that even if there's no visual, you can still kind of be transported to some place in your mind's eye, right? So like there's a lot of creative ways to go about it, but I feel like ultimately there should be some kind of, one should take advantage of the connection between sound and light.
Thank you. एक और मुझे request है कि एक और question ले लें and then we're going to wrap up. So yeah.
Hi guys. First of all, big fan. Not only of all of you, you're amazing, of the Pakistan music industry. Moved back a couple of years ago and discovered Pakistani music and cannot let go. I think we have the best music in the world and I'm not sucking up right now. We're a population of 220 million people. We've got more investment coming in the last few years than any other country around, right? And that's because our population can mobilize a lot of the tech, a lot of the product. So if I were to tell you to answer in one sentence, what can we as fans do? Because you have 220 million people that are listening to you, that can make it easier for you, maybe to earn more revenue, maybe to go more viral, maybe to like be more authentic. What is it that all of us sitting here can do for you that will not only make your life easier, but also make our music go to new heights and be available everywhere?
So what can fans do that can support us artists as a broad question? Whoever wants to go. Abdullah, do you want to go? उन्होंने तो कि Abdullah Kasumbi ने तो कहती थी फतवा दी दें तो लेकिन
I don't know, join our Patreons and share our music. I think आगे जाते हुए with the advent of Web 3.0 and stuff, we'll be able to create more channels where the fans are more active with their interaction with the artist. So we can make merch, Patreon accounts, maybe organize more events. That's it, I guess, I think.
I would say please do what you just did. Don't be shy about loving, Pakistani and following Pakistani music. So big, because what happens is that a lot of times, I don't know if this is still the case, but I used to find it so strange that when we first came on the scene, a lot of Pakistani fans would be like, you know, I don't listen to Pakistani music, but I love you guys. And you know, like I don't desi music मेरा style नहीं है, but तुम लोग बहुत अच्छे. You know, like that kind of zone is like, I mean, we need to get out of that because let's face it, we all love Pakistani music and Pakistani music rocks and we're amazing and that's great. So, and I think आप जो अभी, you know, you got up and you just appreciated us. This means a lot. I think anyone who likes any artist. Also, another thing that we didn't really discuss, but you know, right now it really is that it's not just the creators, but it's also the fans' creations that are helping us make money. So if you like a song, make something on it. You know, make a TikTok video, put it out there so other people let your video be on our music go viral. So let's all go viral.
Thank you very much. So, wrapping this conversation up, I think we question bhi jo aaya tha कि in a country like Pakistan where there's so much diversity of views, there's so many people who may or may not resonate with the message that you're giving out. I think that's one of the core reasons, that element of fear. That's one of the reasons why I'm not just a fan but an admirer of all 4 people present on the panel at the moment. This session ki is in 2 दिन के event का जो नाम है कि not loud, just disruptive. But a lot of admiration for these people who are being loud and disruptive in the market, in the place, in our country where views need to be shaken up. And that fear will always exist. Ki, what if this happens? What if that happens? But thank you everyone for just being who you are and for the work that you do, not only for yourselves, but for everyone around you, making this country a better place to live every day in, day out. Thank you.